Hello and welcome to Pitt Street Research. My name is Stuart Roberts. I'm one of the founders of our firm, and with me is Dr. James Garner of Kazia Therapeutics. James, welcome to Pitt Street Research.
Stuart, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Now, I am particularly excited about this interview. Your colleagues have attended the Society for Neuro-Oncology meeting in Phoenix, Arizona. Not a meeting I've had the privilege of going to. But Kazia had some particularly good news there. Particularly for anyone out there who has glioblastoma, the brain cancer, or may have. Talk to us about what you've got to announce at that meeting.
Yeah, Stuart, it's been great news, actually. Really exciting development for our drug.
Right.
We've been looking at our drug GDC84 in glioblastoma, the most common and the most aggressive form of brain cancer.
Right.
And this is early data from a phase 2 study. So the study is still ongoing. We've still got much more to come. But on the first group of patients, the first 8 patients in the study, we've shown a progression-free survival of about 8.3 months, which compares very favorably to any sort of benchmark for this disease.
Right.
And we've got a number of the patients, in fact, still on the drug, still being treated. So and more patients being recruited as we speak. So it's an early glimpse, but it's a really clear signal in our mind that this drug is fundamentally working, and so that's great news to get at such an early data readout.
Right. So if one is unfortunate enough to get glioblastoma, generally your life expectancy is about 12 months, if I recall. Yeah,
that's correct.
John McCain, for example, the great American senator, that was about his life expectancy from start to finish, I think. However, you're not in a position to talk about life expectancy. Your patients haven't hit the overall survival mark yet, have they?
That's correct. And in a way, that's almost the more exciting data, although it's sort of hard to interpret at this stage. Out of those first 8 patients, 6 of them are still alive at the time of analysis, 3/4 of them. So we haven't hit the median. We haven't hit the halfway mark yet. But we have had at least one of those patients now is still on treatment 16 months after starting.
Okay. Yeah.
So we're really starting to get a sense that these patients are living longer than we would expect.
Sure.
Now we can't technically call it yet because until we reach that halfway point, it's difficult to know what happens next. But it's certainly looking that way. And if we were to show a survival benefit from this drug on just 8 patients of data, that would be incredible. Very, very few cancer drugs are able to demonstrate that sort of effect on such a small group of patients. So we're going to be watching that really, really closely.
Yes. Now, I've been following Kazia for about 2.5 years now. Now, what's interesting about your drug, not all glioblastoma is the same. Some is treatable with the standard of care drug temozolomide with radiation. Some aren't. And the differentiating point is a little biomarker called MGMT. Now, you raised the bar. You treated MGMT methylated patients. Now, stick with us, viewers. This is important. MGMT methylated patients, and they're the ones who generally have no treatment effect with temozolomide, and you've actually extended the progression-free survival of those patients. So if you can hear the champagne corks popping open in Phoenix, that's what people are celebrating, right?
So that's right. It's the unmethylated patients, the ones that are resistant to temozolomide, and that's about 2/3 of the patients.
Yes.
So it's the majority of patients.
Yes.
For those patients, temozolomide, the only existing FDA-approved therapy, adds a matter of weeks of progression-free survival. So very roughly, it extends PFS from about 4.4 to 5.3 months, which is not a great difference. Now, in that exact group of patients, that's where we've been examining GDC84, so these patients who are resistant to temozolomide.
Yes.
And that's where we're seeing 8.4 months as our progression-free survival. So it really looks like we're really just in a different orbit from the existing standard of care. And as I say, these are the patients for whom there just are no existing treatment options.
Now, you've spent a lot of time looking at the universe of potential drugs in development for glioblastoma, and hand on whatever holy book you choose. Your opinion is that you're leading the field in terms of the leading candidate in the clinic headed towards a potential outcome.
I think that's a fair judgment of the situation. You know, there's certainly other drugs in development for brain cancer, as there are for every form of cancer, and different companies are looking at different subgroups of the population, looking at using their drugs in different ways. But if you look at and about every 6 months or so, we sort of do a survey of the landscape and see what else is out there. We're certainly not aware of anybody else who has a drug candidate that is more advanced than GDC84, that is reporting better data in this patient group and in this way of using the drug, and is currently in active development.
Sure.
So we think that GDC84 has every opportunity, of every possibility of being the next drug approved for this disease. Obviously, things can change,
yes.
but we do think we've got really at least one of the most exciting drugs in the global pipeline for this disease.
Now, when you in-licensed the drug, it was interesting. People have talked for years about the so-called PI3K inhibitor class. There was already one approved, and at the time I first discovered you, a second had come along. Now, there are 4 drugs in that class. None of them are available above the blood-brain barrier where you could go after glioblastoma. Yours does. So talk to us about what's important about PI3K as a class that you belong to.
Yeah, Stuart, it's been really interesting to watch the evolution of this class of drugs. So the PI3K inhibitor class, I think it's fair to say when we brought in this drug, there was a little bit of a question mark hanging over the class, whether this was really going to turn into a good way of treating cancer. There are now 4 FDA-approved drugs in this class. 3 of them approved since we brought in the drug. And I think
Novartis just got one approved a little while ago.
That's correct. Yeah, Novartis just had Pitt approved. A very, very exciting drug, real blockbuster potential. And so this is really now a mainstream part of the toolkit for treating cancer. I think this is very, very well validated, very well understood, and very well respected as a class of drugs. The unique thing about our drug is it's the only one that crosses the blood-brain barrier. It's the only drug that can get into the brain. So it's really the only one of this group of drugs that's got any chance of being a brain cancer drug. And so one of the things we love about the drug is it's got this validation, this fact of being a proven quantity by virtue of the other drugs out there, but it's got this unique selling point that separates it from everything else.
Yes. Now, for investors who are wondering how you can build a strong company out of such a rare disease as glioblastoma, let's talk about the economics. There's perhaps 20,000 patients in the United States?
That's probably somewhere around that ballpark. Typically 12 to 15 is the annual incidence in the US, and then about 20 maybe in prevalence.
Okay. And if we price that, say, at $100,000 a year per patient, we're talking potentially a $2 billion market opportunity, currently untapped at the moment.
So that's correct. I mean, certainly we conservatively tend to talk of this as being about $1.5 billion market, but that probably is conservative, and that's been the experience with a lot of these less common cancers. I mean, for example, when Gleevec was approved for GIST, gastrointestinal stromal tumor. It's a relatively rare cancer. A lot of people said, how on earth can that be commercially viable?
Well, that was including the CEO at the time.
Exactly. And that was $1 billion product.
Right.
So
more than that, $6 billion before.
Well, exactly. Exactly. Very, very successful product, and so there's no question in our mind that this is a very commercially attractive opportunity for the drug, and glioblastoma isn't necessarily the limit for us because we do see the opportunity to use the drug in other forms of brain cancer. We actually have 4 other clinical trials ongoing, and potentially that could extend its use into a much, much wider group of patients, and so really, in terms of the commercial opportunity that represents, the sky's the limit. Sure.
Now, James, you've owned this drug now for about 3 years. It had a pretty good provenance. You in-licensed it from the great Genentech, it had a good beginning, and you've obviously taken it forward now. Now, it was always your intention to look for a partner at some stage, given the cost of late-stage drug development is prohibitive for many companies. Is it fair to say now that you're beginning to get a head of steam behind this drug, that the phone is set to ring a little bit with potential partners?
Yeah, it's true. Look, I think it's certainly entering a really interesting phase. I think our strategy as a company, the way we've always conceived Kazia, is a bit like a biotech version of the real estate model of buying a slightly rundown house on a really good street and doing it up and then selling it on. And I think our assumption has always been that ultimately the destination for this drug would be to partner it out to a larger company for commercialization. The question of when is the right time to do that is something that's always arguable. I mean, I think we certainly have a pretty active discussion ongoing with a number of companies, but on the other hand, we want to make sure that we do this in such a way that it maximizes value for our shareholders. So there's no doubt nothing lubricates these discussions like data. And I think the data we've just announced will be a basis for a lot of interesting discussions. But we'll see where those discussions take us.
Now, obviously, very early days. We're doing an interim analysis on the first 8 patients.
Sure.
There's more where that came from, and that just completes phase 2. So it'll be some time before we really start to talk about this drug being available for patients. But it's fair to say you're excited where you're sitting at right now.
Yes, look, I think we're thrilled. I think this has considerably exceeded our expectations at this stage. And I've been involved in the development of a lot of cancer drugs, and to have such a strong signal at this stage, I think is not common. We're usually at this stage looking at early tumor response data and trying to pick apart biomarkers and things like that. But to have this sort of quality of data is very much a pleasant surprise. And there is more to come. There's another 20 patients being enrolled into the study, and it's recruiting well. So I think hopefully we'll start to see that data before too long. And I think then that invites the question, well, what is next for the drug? How do we take it forward into a larger pivotal study to look towards registration? And that may not be a very long time away. Right. So I think we're at the very exciting end of the development of this drug.
Okay. Well, Dr. James Garner, well done for you and your colleagues. You've done a great work for the folks who are suffering from glioblastoma right now and those who will, and you're looking after your shareholders. So keep up the good work.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.